else, and I will do that, and we will be good. Okay, so let's first off tell people exactly what we're going to be doing here. First off, the big thing that we're doing is we're talking about our November event. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and that is coming up November, what is it, 5th through the 7th? Is that right, Bill?
5th and 6th. 5th and 6th, Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, 5 through 6, but there's some other things that a little bit before and a little bit after that we have to do. And that's going to be in the Chicago area, more specifically in Bourbonnais, well, actually Kankakee, right? Kankakee.
Right.
Did I spell that right?
Yeah, that's great, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
So this one of the reasons why
you write Native American.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me run the show here. You're not doing the BET Awards. I'm pulling rank. So here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to have both of them answer your questions, of course, and giving you a little bit of a preview, a sneak preview into what we're going to be doing in November. So first off, welcome. Thank you for being here, folks. And I see that we do have a question from Gary. Okay, so now let's start off with a question. What we're going to do is primarily, although Bill knows marketing and performance. Dave is primarily a performance guy, less on the marketing side. Both of them will be able to help answer questions in the areas. But the first question that I see here is from Gary Mahone, and his question is this. So we're going to go bounce back and forth. Did you have much acting skills or training prior to VO, or did you get into acting after? And what did you do to learn or practice acting? And since we know that Dave Fennoy has that background, let's turn that first over to Bill and see what his answer is.
Oh, gosh, I was afraid you'd do that. I had zero acting background, and people would debate whether I have any acting skills today or not. I have never had an acting class in my life. All my kids are performers, though. They've all been involved in theater and such, so maybe there's a gene there. So the big challenge for me was just learning, in all honesty, to be my genuine self and not to try to project somebody that I wasn't. And that's the ongoing work for me. Some people say that is acting, so perhaps it is. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, you know, I like what you said there, Bill, being your authentic self. And one of the things I find, one of the most difficult things for voice actors is to find that authentic voice, to be just themselves using someone else's words.
Yeah.
That's the battle. And you don't have to have had an acting background, but it helps if somewhere inside you've got some acting talent.
And in retrospect, I wish I'd had some acting.
I was very fortunate. As a child, I was an actor in Cleveland at Caramoo House. I was a theater major in college before I became a musician and a disc jockey. And I really think that all of that helped in my voiceover career.
Let me ask, Dave, let's assume, and it's hard for you to do, I'm sure, but assume you had none of that background. Do you think you still could have gotten to the level of success that you have now?
That's one of those hypothetical questions that you just really can't answer. Maybe, maybe not. Being the same person that I am, I'm not saying this with a big head or anything, but I have a certain amount of acting ability, acting talent. And I've trained enough, even if I hadn't had the background before I got into voiceover, I've trained enough with enough voiceover coaches, voiceover acting coaches, that I like to think that I would have developed the acting chops, even if I hadn't had the acting background to begin with.
We have a great question next. Thank you for the answer. We have a great question next that both of you, I know this is one of your favorite areas. If you can hear a little something in my voice, you'll know what might be coming. Pete Beretta asks, love doing audiobooks. What's the best way to get on with companies like Blackstone and Tenter?
Bill?
Well, first of all, my disclaimer is this. It's been several years since I've been in the audiobook biz because I've opted to...
Oh, really? Why?
Well, for pay reasons. I've tried to evolve into higher paying gigs. And generally speaking, unless you're recording like a New York Times bestseller or something along that line, it doesn't, it's, at least for me, it's been far more profitable to do commercial and corporate type of work. However, the landscape, I know enough about it to say the landscape has changed quite a bit. And that most, if not almost all of the publishers are now using ACX as the platform to recruit talent. So ACX, which is owned, by Amazon, Audio Creative Exchange, is where I would start. Now, you can always contact a Blackstone or whoever directly, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to be redirected to ACX.
And Dave, you want to weigh in on that? But again, let's just preface this by saying
I have done 3 books, so I am not an expert on audiobooks in any way. I will say that one of my books was nominated for an Audi, but I for the same reasons that Bill doesn't pursue audiobooks, I don't either. It's a lot of work for not very much money. And I've done a lot of TV promos. I went into ABC one day and said, next. They said, you're done, get out of here. They put it on 25 spots. A couple weeks later, I had a check for $5,000. So it's really hard.
That's what I'm talking about.
Wrap my mind around being in a studio hour after hour, day after day. And when you do all the editing and everything else, you're making almost minimum wage.
Yeah.
Well, that's better than that. But it's a lot of time for not very much money.
Now, what would you guys say for the people who are just starting out, similar to some of the people who are angry at us for suggesting Fiverr as a place to start? Might it also not be a bad idea that if you're starting to look to get your narration chops, to go ahead and do some audiobooks?
I think it's quite viable. It's honest work. It's out there. There are zillions and zillions of books that need narrators. So there are openings there. And one of the things you have to do to get better at anything is do it. And that gives you an opportunity to do a lot of reading and bringing your voice through the microphone to narrate those books.
And I'll second that. I've recorded 41 audiobooks. And I don't regret at all that I did. I'm very glad. And I suggest to people getting started to absolutely get involved in audiobooks, because today it's not uncommon for me to get a 15, a 25, a 50, sometimes 100 pages of narration. And I can chew through that stuff with the greatest of ease, for the most part, because I've spent my hours behind the microphone doing long form work.
Cool.
Well, there's, I used to tell people with reading problems, and a lot of people don't think they have a reading problem, and maybe they don't, but you have to be a better reader to read out loud.
Yeah.
To read the newspaper, read magazines, read stories, read books. Just read out loud. Not as we usually read, to ourselves, but out loud, mouthing the words. That's great practice just to train your eye to pick up the words, translate it through your brain, and have it come out of your mouth.
Absolutely.
Good. Let's move on. Hey, good answers. Yeah, Mike Hennessy's asking, and Bill, this might be more for you. I just filled out my voices.com profile, and they've offered $100 off their annual fee. If I sign up, will there be immediate action? I hope.
Well, let's define action. Yeah, sure. You will start receiving auditions immediately. So now that's the initial action you can count on. Now, in terms of action, in terms of getting hired, that's not for any of us to say. You could be hired on your first job, or like me, you may have to go 100 jobs before you get your first job until you really learn how this whole system works. I know people have gone longer than that, but to go on to success afterwards. So what you're really is you're paying for access to a large database of clients. And again, what happens after that is entirely up to you.
Well, I'm saying this not as a huge fan of the pay-to-play sites. People are making them work and making money, and I'm not saying don't do it. But one of the benefits is that you do get to audition. You do get to read a lot of copy, and that can't help but make you a better voice actor.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I would just add to that it's funny, because if you were to put this couple of things we talked about, and it's kind of dovetails into Andrew's question, which I'll ask and then I'll put in what my 2 cents are here. Andrew says, since Lance's Fiverr breakthrough, Bill, Fred, have you guys heard any negative response from the real VO community? And the answer is yes, yes, and more yes.
I actually got kicked off. Oh, I'm sorry, Fred. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I won't name names, but I got kicked off of a website that had asked to list me previously as a coach, which was fine. It's a rather large organization, and because of that, in the nicest way, I was disowned from that particular group. So yeah, I would say I got clubbed around pretty good for that.
I got, I wouldn't say I got clubbed, but I mentioned today that on Facebook that we were having this webinar, and somebody, Bill DeWees, the guy who's promoting Fiverr, he's denigrating our industry. To which I said, no, I'm not a fan of Fiverr. I'm certainly not going to be doing Fiverr, but people have to start somewhere. And I know when I started my voiceover career, I was not in the union. I had to do non-union work. I had to do what I could find. So if somebody is using Fiverr and getting a foothold, and I guarantee those jobs aren't jobs that we're going to go to me or Bill or anybody else who has worked their way up the ladder. So on one hand, no, I'm not a fan of Fiverr, but on the other hand, people got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the way that I see this, and again, both of you guys can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I see Fiverr as like the very, very first kind of minor league team where you get in, and the beauty about it is you don't even have to audition. You get the work without auditioning. Then you move to Voices or the pay-to-play sites, the Voice 123, and you're now auditioning to get the work. And then, and again, Dave, this is more your area, then you move to agent representation, in which a lot, and what percentage of your jobs come in as a result of agents putting you in front of clients?
Oh, I'd say the majority. The majority. I don't have a percentage for you, but 80, 90%.
And
there are jobs that come my way just because I've been around a long time. People know my reputation, or they've heard my voice. Oh, we want him on that. And even then, they're calling my agent. Oh, could you book Dave Fennoy for this?
And so, and in your case, Bill, it's very different,
about
right?
2%.
Your number of jobs that you get from agents is how many?
2% of my income comes through agencies.
Wait a second, that's 2%, correct?
2, well, yeah, as in 2, right?
Now you talk about, this is why I think this is so interesting, because Bill DeWees gets 2% of his business from agents, and Dave Fennoy gets, I would say, upwards of 80%, right?
Oh yeah.
So you've got two very, very different perspectives here, which for you, if you're watching, listening, attending one of our events, this will be very, very valuable to you, because I certainly wouldn't want to hear from people who have the same perspective and are just regurgitating each other's ideas.
And let me say something. I discovered Bill a few years ago. I think, Bill, you were probably just getting started doing videos on about teaching.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like about you is, in this DIY world that we're living in now, this do-it-yourself world, you had found a way to create a career for yourself, and you were sharing that with other people. Well, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of people out there who would like to be doing what we're doing, who need a way other than the path I took, which was through agents and almost strictly union work, especially since I came to Los Angeles in 1990. But unions for the past 30 years, unfortunately, have been losing power. And so many, we've got the so-called right to work states, which means right to make less states. So people need an alternative if this is what they want to do before they find their way to good union jobs.
We've just heard three valid paths, and there may be more than this, but there's Dave, who's a much higher profile, living in Los Angeles, working primarily through agents, which is kind of, when people envision the dream, that's the dream. There was my path, which is non-union, but because of my marketing skills, I've turned it into a very lucrative career for myself. And then you've got a Lance Tomashiro, who we know personally. This is a man of integrity and truth. This is a guy who has a hobby as a hobby, works 1 hour a day on Fiverr, and we've seen the numbers, consistently makes between $4,000 and $5,000 a month. So these are three very valid paths.
Let's revise that upwards, about 90 minutes a day. So he's doing about an hour.
Okay,
and a
90,
half.
all right.
And by the way, just quickly for a Duncan Lawrence who may not have joined us before, we do not take multi-part, 5-part questions. We have over 475 people registered for this. Duncan, if I did that, there'd be no way. So if you want to keep a question pithy and make it short, I'll look at it. If not, and I guess this may be your first time, so just giving you a heads up on that. Enrique Josephs asked, just wanted to say hi to Bill. I took his class last year and have had some major VO success. Thank you. I know, Dave, you do video games. What is the great way to break into video games? Now, I might add that in a very few short weeks, a recording of a recent seminar that we did a couple weekends ago will be available. Please stay tuned. But other than that, Dave, what do you think?
Well, if you're in Los Angeles, you have representation, you want to tell your agent, hey, look, I'd like to be submitted for some video games. At which point they might go, well, let's see what you can do with character voices. And they'd ask to hear your video game demo. And if you had one, great. If you don't, well, then you probably have to make one, get some training to make one. What I'm doing is working backwards. Now, if you once you've made that demo, if you have an agent, great. Your agent can help shop you, but always help yourself as well. Find out who the game developers are. I think we're in a very, very advantageous time, especially for video games. It's the biggest entertainment industry in the world, dwarfs movies and music combined as far as money. College programs have game development programs now, and guess what all those game developers want to do? They want to make video games. And guess who they can't afford to hire? Me. They might be able to afford to hire you, though. They wouldn't be paying as much, or maybe you can make a deal with them that you get a piece of the action, go entrepreneurial on them. And who knows, you might strike lightning. You get with the right project that suddenly goes, and now you're a millionaire on this one game, and I don't know how I did it. I was just doing that one thing. So do your homework. Make sure once again, one of the things I like about Bill is his marketing. Is he found a way to market himself. And frankly, I want to learn, and I've been learning some things from Bill too. So I would go that route if you don't have the agent route to go.
Good one. And let me just say that, again, when we get together in November with the two of these folks and we do this event coming up, it'll be very interesting to see the different perspectives, one marketing and one performance. But again, Bill has a lot of performance, does a lot of coaching in that area as well. But it's great to see. One of the things that I enjoyed in watching the event that we did for video game actors in Los Angeles, Dave, was when you were up there with Randall Ryan, who does a lot of directing of these kinds of things. It was really interesting to see the difference in how you saw a read and he saw a read, and the perspectives each of you brought.
Well, I come from the actor perspective, and he comes from a director perspective, and they can be very, very different. Which is why you have a director to herd us acting cats in line.
Now, JDK asked a great question, and Dave, this is a compliment and a question. JD says, JD is one of our regular attendees. Dave speaks very clearly with zero mouth noise. Does he have any secrets to recommend how to make that happen?
Keep your mouth moisturized. Drink a lot of water.
Right. And throw in a little Purell as well, yeah?
I leave the Purell alone. But there was a time when I wanted to have a voice like Don LaFontaine, and I thought about gargling with Drano, but I thought better of it.
There you go.
Okay, sounds good. You know what? This is a really good question from Eric. Eric, I think that's Eric Booker, who asks, who did or do you train or coach under to hone your own VO skills, the two of you? Dave, I know a little bit that Maurice Tobias is somebody that Bill has gone to. How about you?
I have worked with Maurice Tobias. I have worked with Nancy Wolfson. I have worked with a bunch of different people, and will again. I would like to make it clear that no matter where you are in your career, there are times you need to get rid of some old habits, clean yourself up. The world is changing constantly, which means the kinds of reads that are acceptable are changing, and you're going to have to adjust and adjust and adjust throughout your lifetime to stay viable.
Got it. Sounds good here. So let's see here. Again, I'm trying to look for some of these pithy questions here. Max Torres Pintos asks, should I try to get rid of my Mexican/Spanish accent, or am I limited by it when trying to get work? In other words, somebody who has an accent, regardless of what it is, should they try and do accent elimination work? There was actually a woman I knew, that I dated years ago, Laura Darius, who did accent reduction work in New York City. Is that something you guys would recommend?
Bill, you got
Well, yeah, that's a tough question. I get asked that a lot, and my answer is depends. There are some people who can carve out very successful careers just doing what they do, because you'd be shocked at the demand for dialects in different communities that you would never expect. I was, just a quick story, I was on Skype being directed by a client in Germany this past week, where I was reading a script for a Danish client. But they wanted a North American accent. But the funny thing was, I was really struggling with these Danish pronunciations. And the German director was having a good laugh at my expense, helping me work through that. But the point is, who would have ever thought that they would have wanted a guy from Illinois to do that? So, yeah, go ahead.
You know what, Bill? I was at a game developer conference in Malmo, Sweden, a couple of years ago. They all speak English. They all speak English
Yes.
very well.
Yeah.
It's the language that keeps them together between Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Germany, England. They do all their business in English.
It certainly helps our cause, no doubt about that. But that being said, I mean, if you have the ability, if you can hire a dialect coach or dialect reduction coach, it certainly would not hurt to expand your market.
Yeah, I would say get rid of your dialect. Let me put it this way. Keep your dialect, but learn to do, say, an American dialect or an English dialect or any other dialect that you can do, just to expand your opportunities. Do not think that what your accent is going to keep you from working, but the more accents you can do, the more you can be the real you in different accents, the more work you can go after.
Dave, let me ask you a very politically incorrect question. I'll ask it delicately and in a way that I think you'll appreciate it. I'm guessing, just from looking at the credits, and I always see when I look at your work, that a lot of the credits you get are oftentimes, and again, I may be wrong here, African American characters, yes or no, and therefore, do you think that there is any kind of a not a bias, but I mean, is there a propensity to use those people? And again, your voice, before I met you, I didn't know. I don't know what color you are. So talk about that a little bit, because people listening, this is a question I'm sure they might have.
Well, right now, I'm working for BET, doing some promos for the BET Experience. I had some packages that I did in the BET Awards. Now, that's definitely working in the Black area. But I do a lot of things that aren't necessarily ethnic. And I'm also looking at the number of Black people who sound like Black people, who are very identifiably Black, who are still doing general market work. And that is a change that has come since I started in this business. There was a time I would not have put my picture on my demo. I put it on there proudly now. I get hired to do general market campaigns and play general people who aren't necessarily Black or white, and then of course a lot of creatures and games, and we don't know what they are.
Right.
Because our society has changed quite a bit. There are some people out there trying to pull us back, but society has changed, and I'm hearing Common doing commercials. A lot of Black folks are being spokespeople when it has nothing to do with being black.
And does your voice change when you're doing BET versus doing something you consider general market?
It can. The thing I'm doing for BET is more of a hip hop thing. We're having a good time.
Yeah.
So I can go there,
Right.
but I can also go here.
Absolutely, 100%. That's why, and I just think that you have one of those voices that is so, you guys both have great voices in your own way. And I'm just wondering if that ethnicity, because a question like, that some of the folks have had, I think this is a real issue. I mean, people were wondering, will they hear my Hispanic accent that's underneath this? Will they hear whatever accent is underneath it? I think it's important.
I'm hearing all kinds of accents on general market commercials as I'm looking at the copy that comes my way. A lot of times they're saying, we'd like to hear English, we'd like to hear Southern, we'd like to hear Black. We are open to listening to a variety of kinds of voices, which says in many ways our society is growing up because it wasn't like this when I got into the business.
Understood. And thank you. Yeah, again, this is something I'm sure people are thinking, and very few people, except for people like me, will ask the questions. I'm here.
No, actually, it's a good question because I get to ask this question all the time. And I've been surprised in the last few years how many voice actors, aspiring voice actors who are Black, have asked me those questions that have told me, hey, man, I look up to you because of your career. And, you're my guidepost. And I'm like, oh, really? Wow, okay. But it's important. It's an important question that people have to ask themselves.
Good. Okay. Next one from Dave Gilbert, I think is a good one. For both Dave and Bill, if you were to start from scratch today, not having the years of experience and reach the status you both have, what is the path you would choose to go from nothing to a producing VO artist? Bill, I think I know your answer. Let me hear from Dave.
Wow. These hypotheticals. I went out and sought a lot of work myself when I started. I started knocking on doors of some of the TV stations. I was living in San Francisco. I was a disc jockey. I started knocking on the doors of the TV stations. I started sending out demos to the broadcast producers. I would probably be doing something similar to what Bill has done because I was a go-getter. I was a self-starter. I was trying to find work on my own. The amount of work non-union was not nearly as great then. We're also talking about a time there was no internet. If you were going to work, you had to go see your agent for your auditions. You went to a studio to work. Now we all have home studios. It's a very different world. So I imagine the mindset I was in, I'd be doing something like Bill.
Hey, Bill, what's your answer?
I don't think I would have changed the marketing approach so much because the thing I would have really focused on, what I've learned, is I really needed a lot of coaching that I did not realize that I needed when I first started. I thought, I've been a radio personality. I've been in radio for over 20 years. I thought, hey, I can do this stuff. How hard could it be, right? Yeah. Well, I was very one-dimensional, and I did get work, but it was only within one very, very narrow genre of style. And it wasn't until I really began working with Maurice a number of years ago that I really began to expand and begin to really explore and understand myself, and that it's people hire me, not the sound of my voice, and that really changed everything.
It's a little scary, isn't it?
It makes you very vulnerable. Yes.
Yeah, she's a psychologist with your voice. She will tell you about yourself from your read.
And I think that both of you guys are alluding to something here that everyone should pay close attention to, which is no matter, and this applies to golfers, it applies to soccer players, it applies to voiceover artists, everyone, no matter how good they are, needs someone on the outside to give them feedback about their abilities and how to bring their game to the next level, correct?
Oh, yes.
Oh, absolutely. Every great athlete has a coach.
Yep.
They're training with somebody. Somebody is helping them along. You can't do it all yourself. Now, you can get to a place where you can coast along without a coach for a while, but the world may pass you by. The style of read may pass you by without you realizing it, and suddenly you're not working. I've seen it happen to a lot of people.
Next question from Winston Douglas. Bill, you're best for this one. What are your best pointers for going full-time as voice artist with a limited startup budget?
Oh, I was getting ready to say make sure you save a lot of money first, but I guess that eliminates it eliminates that. Well, the first thing is we deal with this a lot with we have a DeWees members group, and we're always trying to get people launched really from zero. And I think oftentimes people put too much time, emphasis, and money into their studio. And let me qualify that. I mean, you need to have a good studio, but there are ways to produce high quality audio without spending $5,000 to $10,000 right off the bat. I was making, I think, six figures before I even let go of my $300 setup that I had. I mean, I made it work because I worked in a very quiet space. It was well treated, et cetera, et cetera. So put the emphasis on the things where they really should be. Your performance, your demo, that's huge.
Huge.
Yeah, without that, and Dave mentioned that earlier. I mean, if you don't have that, nobody's going to give you the time of day. Your first job is to be heard, and if you don't have a good demo, you will not be heard.
Dave, anything to add to that?
I think that makes perfect sense. A lot of people want to put the cart before the horse. You got to be trained. You have to be able to actually do the job, and you have to then be able to demonstrate that you can do the job. Before you can just jump out there with the website and I've got the $10,000 studio and I've got the best mics and so forth. They're making a lot of great equipment now that doesn't cost that much. If you've got a closet with clothes in it and a decent couple $100 mic, and there's several brands, I'm not going to mention one, and you got a Mac or a PC, you've got what you need to start a studio.
Yeah.
I think that my impression again, and the funny thing is that I think that before either of you started doing voiceover work, I actually put a voiceover tape together. And by the way, Bill, Dave actually knew Steve Harris, the guy who put my demo tape together. From New York.
Really?
It's kind of amazing that I've come full circle. I've never gotten one paid dollar from voice work. Let it know. But this is, I think, an interesting question. Heather Foster doesn't know your work as well, Mr. Fennoy, and she's asking, and this is one of those things where if you have the breakdown, you can probably give us a ballpark idea. Question for Dave: do you still do commercial work, or are you mostly doing video games now?
Well, I'm best known for video games because video games are going the way of TVs and movies. Fans want to know who the voices are, who the stars are playing the parts. But I still do a lot of commercials. I still do TV promos. I still do narrations for National Geographic, Discovery Channel, Science Channel. I do it all. I do educational voiceover. I do a wide variety of things, but not everything I do comes to the public's attention.
Got it. Dave Gilbert is asking, and this is a good one, I think. Dave was just mentioning about reading aloud. Is there any other, and I want both of your answers on this, is there any other exercise or things you can do to improve enunciation and articulation? And I have a follow-up.
Bill, you got an answer on that?
I thought it'd be easier for you to go because I'm watching you. I can see what you're doing. You can't see what I'm doing. Okay, but thanks. Since you gave me, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, most people enunciate just wonderfully, and one of the big pitfalls I find people fall into is once they pick up a piece of copy, they over enunciate. I would not stress learning to enunciate unless you have some kind of speech impediment. I wouldn't worry about that at all. What I would worry about is really coming from your heart. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's your attitude? And being that character. Now, there are different genres of voiceover that are going to require more articulation than some others. If you're doing promos, you might have, you're going to elongate your words a little bit. Every word's going to be heard, that kind of thing. But if you're doing video games, commercials, real person, spend less worry about articulating and more on, translating those thoughts, those feelings through you and come out like a real person.
Bill, before you answer, I'm going to ask a follow-up with Dave there because I saw this at the workshop that we just did. One of the things that you talked about then that you will talk about in November, which I thought was very, very interesting, is you noticed, and I saw this mistake that you pointed out to virtually everybody in the room when they first got started with a piece of copy. And that was that they tended to read the words and not the phrases. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, we pick up a piece of copy that's somebody else's, and because we're not familiar with it, we want to make sure that we are seeing every word. So we start speaking every word as we are reading. So I am reading this thing, the voice of Bill DeWees, the voice of Dave Fennoy, as opposed to the voice of Bill DeWees, the voice of Dave Fennoy. You can clearly hear the difference. My enunciation has softened. However, you hear every word, and it sounds like a real person, as opposed to it sounds like a real person. Can you hear the difference? I can't hear your answer, but that's what I talk about in reading the phrases, not the words.
Bill, any thoughts?
Yeah, let me just say this. Generally speaking, most people, especially as they get into this business, tend to focus on the wrong things first. They get all wrapped up in technical. Am I articulating correctly? The question is, are you communicating effectively? And your articulation can actually, yes, get in the way of your communicating. And I've been in more than one commercial session myself where the producer says, do you do a lot of narration work? And I say, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And he says, well, quit being so perfect. So just talk, just quit being so articulate.
That was $1 million advice, Bill.
Well, and for you tonight, it's only... Thanks, Dave.
Hey, now I know one of the things that you wanted to do, Bill, just for people who may get off a little bit early off of this event, could you tell them a little bit about what kind of a special deal you have for them?
Well, yeah, here's what we're going to do. By the way, this deal it's open until midnight tonight for those of you who know that you would like to come to this live event in November, which we certainly hope you do, November 4th and 5th, as we mentioned earlier. We are going to give you, if you register by midnight tonight, and that's midnight Eastern time, by the way, not Pacific, Eastern time. So you'll only have a few hours after this, but we're going to give you the video recordings of the event, which will be sold afterwards. So that's going to be about a $200 value there. And we're also going to throw in, I have a program called 100 VO, Top 100 VO Questions. It's my responses to the top 100 questions that I frequently get in video format. I don't know how many, it's like 13 or 15 hours, I think, of video.
Wow.
And that's a $197 program. So essentially, we're going to give you $400 worth of free stuff if you register by midnight tonight.
And is there any code necessary for that?
Oh, yes. I'm glad you asked, Fred. Webinar bonus is the code. And the website is 100voquestions.com.
Okay, so now wait a second. Webinar bonus, and wait a second. Where do they put that?
They will put that in the where you buy, where it asks for the coupon code.
Did I spell this correctly? Webinar bonus? Is there capitals?
It doesn't matter. It works either way.
Okay.
It works either way.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is that people are probably wondering where can they sign up for this event, and we've got to tell them it's Voice Over Revolution, revolutionevent.com.
Correct.
And why did you use the term, Bill, Voice Over Revolution? Dave, I don't know if you've heard the answer to this.
Well, technology, and we've alluded to it earlier, is very disruptive when it comes to business. It continually changes and evolves the way we communicate, the way we do business, the way we interact, and voiceover is no exception to that. I mean, it's happened in every industry, and the thought that somehow this little industry would escape that is just, it's ridiculous. It's affected us very much, and the business model has changed. The power has gone from the few to the many. You now are equipped to be able to take control of your own destiny like never before. So that's why I like to use revolution, because really it is a revolution. And that's why so many people get upset when we start talking this kind of language, because it's like, oh no, you're upsetting my Apple cart. I had this all figured out. Now everything's, well, what it is more people can now enter and take part and benefit, once they learn the tools and the systems to do it.
Okay, another question here before, and so again, if you want to sign, this is the event, sign up for the event. This is the website here I'm highlighting, and then this will give you the bonuses, which are worth a lot of money. So
Yeah.
do that if you're interested. I know it's kind of a it's a ways off, but again, get in there early and get going to take advantage of these two talents. Paul Kreiner asks, what is the difference between e-learning, educational narration, etc.? I hear that that's the largest segment of VO. How best to market myself for that? Bill, you do a lot of that kind of work. You want to answer that?
Well, educational is just really the broad general umbrella for anything where you're teaching. E-learning is very specific to online, which, quite frankly, almost all learning narration these days, unless you're doing some sort of TV. Like I've done stuff for like National Geographic that's used in schools, like in junior high schools. So that, if it's delivered within the classroom outside of a computer, it's not e-learning, it's educational. And I've done stuff for highlights for children as well. So really, I don't really look at them any differently. I mean, for me, it's all educational. It's all educational, e-learning, whatever. How do you market yourself? Well, it's very difficult if you go about it looking for people who only produce educational content, because the truth is, most of this stuff is done by shops, video production houses that do a broad base of work. TV, corporate, educational. I've never focused on the educational market. I've focused on production houses, which in turn tend to hire me for a lot of educational because apparently it's something I'm well suited for, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, I do some educational. I have not done nearly as much as Bill. The last thing you said there, Bill, that your voice is suited for it. And I think people are going to find that their voices are suited for one thing or another now that may change later as the world changes, that whole revolution thing that you were talking about. And one of I don't care that you're getting in the business now and this is the way things are now. It's not going to be this way 5 years from now. It's going to be different. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be different.
It'll be exciting.
Question. What's that?
Whatever it is, it'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Chris Burke is asking, I just started in VO and had one in-person VO class and one audiobook under my belt. Where's a good place to expand my voice range and depth? Dave?
What do you mean exactly by expand your range and depth? Are you talking about your voice specifically, or the kinds of things, the kinds of reads, the different genres that you can do?
Given the number of questions we have here, I can only speculate as to the answer to that question, and I will go with A, which is the actual timbre of one's voice.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't worry about changing the timbre of your voice. Your voice is your voice, and you can actually do damage trying to speak higher than you should or lower than you should on a regular basis. Sometimes we're going to dip down or go a little bit higher than we usually would talk. But I wouldn't try to push that. What you really want to push is your communication skills. How can I make myself a better communicator? How can I touch people's heads and hearts? How can I move them to, buy product, watch TV shows, cry, laugh, sing, all of those things? You want to be able to touch people. That's just communication.
So, Dave, would you say, and at risk of sounding like Barney the dinosaur, be the best you can be?
Absolutely. Be the best you can be. Now, there's things you can expand, you can learn. I liken voiceover work to being a musician in many ways. And just like you've got different styles of music, there's R&B, there's hip hop, there's country western, there's folk music, there's jazz. There are different styles of voiceover, and you can learn those different styles and word attack. And it's a lot of that you can do by taking classes with the right people who can teach you those things, which is one of the things I'm going to touch on in this workshop in Chicago, will be how to do different styles. Do that. Learn to be to be able to do as many different styles as you can, and it makes you more marketable.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get close to touching the third rail of the voiceover business at risk of electrocuting myself. And here's how I want to do it. I want to get the pluses and minuses of a certain topic, and I'm going to hand the pluses over to Dave Fennoy, the minuses over to Bill DeWees on the topic of unions, the benefits of being in the union for Dave Fennoy, the negatives to being in a union for Bill DeWees. Go ahead, Dave, and start.
Well, you have somebody that, if you're doing union work, the people who pay you are also paying into your pension and retirement. Once you're making a certain amount of money, you have health care. If you're not being paid, you have somebody to go after your money. You get the benefit of negotiation for better working conditions and better pay. Those are the benefits of the union. Is it perfect? No. But the best work still comes through the unions. And ultimately, until it's proven to me otherwise, I think that is what you should strive for.
Counterpoint from Mr. DeWees.
Well, let me reframe the question because I'm not an expert on the union, so I don't know if it's.
Before you start, let me just credit the originator of this question. I kind of changed it. John Warsham, thank you for the question.
Yeah, let me reframe it to what I believe the pluses of non-union are, and then in terms of exactly how the union operates in a lot of ways, I don't know. I do think I could totally agree with Dave that the best jobs, I don't think there's any question, are going to come through the unions. The thing that I like about non-union is that I don't have to compete for a fewer number of jobs. I feel like I have a very big pool to choose from, and over time, as Dave mentioned earlier, a lot of clients. I mean, gosh, I've worked for tons of Fortune 500s in corporate and commercial work, and a lot of them are migrating away from the union shops that they worked with previously, and no doubt because they can get by with paying less. I have no doubt about that, but that's what technology tends to do. It tends to commoditize us. So I like being able, I have a greater chance of making a greater amount of money on average. Now, Dave is part of toward the top of the heap, what you do. I would say the odds of making it in non-union are greater, although you may take a lower average rate. But I like to be able to pick the clients I want. I don't mind collecting my own money. I've got that skill set. Negotiating, I don't mind doing all of that stuff.
It's very interesting to me because having both of you guys as clients, I see two entirely different business models. And Dave, like I've told you face to face, Bill is, if we were to take the total number of hours that you spend, Dave, in the booth working for the money that you make versus Bill's, I think, Bill, you'd be the first one to admit this, that Dave probably gets a higher hourly rate on average.
Oh, no doubt. Yes, exactly. And that's really my point. Yes. And if somebody could guarantee that to me tomorrow, I'd absolutely jump the fence. I have no problem with that.
Got it. And there's a question here, Dave, that you'll find kind of interesting because I had a conversation with Randall Ryan about this. It's from Eric Hernandez, and he wants to know, he says he hears that networking is the best place to start a voiceover business. And he went on to add some other sort of nuance to that. One of the things when talking to Randall after your event that he said to me was he, as a director, has a stable of voice. He keeps records on every voiceover artist he's ever used. And the people that he tends to work with repeatedly are people he likes and people who stay in touch with him. Could you address that?
Absolutely. I just had a client that I was working with a few weeks ago doing some educational voiceover, and I have sent her a number of talents. I need a woman like this, I need a guy like this, and I've sent her some talent. And one of the things, she just out of the blue said, you really sent me some really good people. Well, I like hanging with really good people. So that's what I would, and she says, there are people who come to me and they want to talk about all their problems or all their complaints, or they're just not nice people. And they may be ever so fine a talent, but I just don't want to work with them. I don't want them around. I want good energy around me. Yeah. Randall says the same thing. I've been in a workshop with a buddy of mine we were trying to meet the casting director for one of the big animated movie producers out here, and she had just cast him in a movie, and she mentioned that she had met him 5 years before, heard him, got his demo, remembered him all this time, and when that movie came up, she called him. So yes, networking is very important. Make a good impression on people. Show up with a smile, on time, be a benefit to people. I'm sure Bill will agree with me. I hear people, oh, I need a job. Can you give me a job? No, you don't. You don't go asking for a job. You let people know how you can help them. Be a positive. You're not asking for something. You're offering your services.
Amen to that. No, that's absolutely right. And I've been told time and time again by clients, same thing that Dave did. They want to work with people who are reliable, who are easy to work with. And, one of the biggest compliments I get if I'm in a session and toward the end they go, that was easy. That's what I want to hear. That was easy.
Let me say from an outsider's point of view, having worked with both of you guys and watched how you behave, both towards your students and towards other people that are kind of incidental to the whole process. Both of you are incredibly gracious, do not have big egos, and expect to be stroked by the people you're around. And I think that people smell that, they like it, and they want more of it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. I mean, I've watched, when I've been at any events that we do, Dave, both of you guys, you treat the people, whether it's the waiter who comes to our table when we're out for lunch, you don't talk down to that person. Everybody is a real person, and I think that everyone can feel that and appreciate that. And I think you guys would both say that it's part and parcel, being a good human being, and that karma thing or whatever goes a long way.
Yeah.
Kenneth Gill, next question. For a person with other commitments to make a living, can one grow a VO career on a very part-time basis until making enough to support oneself? Good question.
You mind if I dive in here on this one? Because I deal with those folks all day long. And yes, you can. It takes a commitment. Obviously, it takes time. It takes work. It takes development. But there does, and here's the thing I want to address. There comes a point in time where you have to make a decision. You gotta cut bait or fish or whatever. You can't always straddle both sides of the fence. And I remember hearing a slogan, or maybe it was my grandmother told me growing up, you can't steal second unless you leave first. And I don't believe in being stupid, don't get me wrong. But I do believe there comes a time when if you're a security seeker, you have a hard time letting go of what you've got. But you have to decide what's most important to you at some point in time. But yes, definitely you can begin to grow your career while you're working.
Absolutely. I so agree with everything you just said. Let me warn you about a pitfall. You've got a nice little job and you want this voiceover career. Save your money. Don't spend that money on that job. Put that money away. Because when you buy that new car and you've got a car note and then you bought this and you've got that note and you bought this, after a while you are addicted to the money that job brings you. And you will come to that decision and where, hey, it's time to jump off into voiceover. And I can almost guarantee you when you make that jump off, you won't be making as much in voiceover as you were making whatever the career was or whatever the job was. So save your money. Don't overspend. Don't get yourself into a whole lot of debt when you're trying to switch from one career to a voiceover career.
That's wise. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's good counsel. And I'm staying with a buddy of mine. I'm in his office right now, who's a PhD in finance and has written books on and does writes books about personal finance and how not to overspend and how to keep things together. But I'll tell you, I think it can whether it's in voiceovers or any other business that if you live below your means, you're almost always better off. I think we can all agree with that, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Here's a general question from Walter Bortz, and I think that this reflects, again, we have in our audience listening to people at a variety of different levels, and Walter asked, what percentage of work is raw audio tracks versus edit broadcast ready? And Dave, start with you versus Bill.
Most of what I do is raw audio tracks. Very, very rarely do I do anything other than maybe edit out some mistakes and normalize to -3 dB. That is about it.
And on my end, everything is edited. Sometimes, if it's a commercial for a client, I'll do everything. I'll deep breath. I'll make sure the time fits exactly within what is needed. But yeah, everything's edited.
Well, you know what? Let me say this. In response to what you just said, I will do some editing, and say on commercials now, I make them to time, whether it's an audition or I've got the job, because one of the things we find happening now is your agent calls you, oh, you booked that thing you auditioned for. Oh, great. When's the session? Oh, no, they're just going to use your audition. That happens a lot now. So I say all the time, there are no auditions. There are only performances.
Hey, Bill, you've worked it up with me. I have a comment here from Brad Giffen that says, Fred, stop talking. How would you respond?
I would say this webinar probably go quiet pretty fast.
We need you, Fred.
You are the circus ringmaster, my friend.
Absolutely.
Does
that make us elephants?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so Cindy Pedraza is asking, and by the way, this is getting close to one of our last questions because we're about at the hour. We're going to do another one of these, folks, so feel free to jump on another free webinar that we're going to be doing here coming up in the next couple of weeks. And again, all of this is to help promote this event, voiceoverrevolutionevent.com, but at the same time, give you some great ideas and things that you can take away. But Cindy Pedraza asks, I'm just starting out, so when putting my demo together, what VO style should be included in the demo, and should I include background music? So I know that if I go to your site, Dave Fennoy, and if I go to your site, Bill DeWees, that you will have different demos. Should I be setting up as a new voiceover artist multiple demos?
Well, that is the goal ultimately, but bite off one chunk at a time. Because when you look at putting together a voiceover career, it's like a huge elephant. Since we're talking about elephants, the whole circus thing, it's a huge elephant, and you can't fit it all in your mouth all at once. Most people are going to go for a commercial demo first. I still think that's a very good idea. That's probably where most of the very good work is. But there are people who might want to do an audiobook demo first if that's the route they want to take. But get that first demo done. And what you want to have on that demo is you in various styles where you're happier or sadder or more serious or more reassuring, and a variety of clients. So you're going to have maybe some large retail or fast food and automotive and healthcare and financial, a variety of client, and it's going to be 1 minute long.
And I agree with everything Dave Fennoy said. I agree with the start with your commercial demo. I do most of my work's narration, but most of the listens on my demos are commercial, even from my narration clients, because I get hired off the strength of my commercial demo because it shows a broader range of my capabilities. The only thing I would add to that comment, it sounds like she's trying to put together her own demo. I would highly recommend that you find a competent, tried, true professional demo producer. Otherwise, you might as well I would wait.
So you're saying
and that other question, yes, music on it, music and production,
yes,
on it.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is, if you can't yet afford to do a good demo, wait and have a good demo produced. Give it a little time, save a little money, rather than have one that's kind of half-baked, correct?
Absolutely.
You'll only frustrate yourself if you don't.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I've got a last a comment. Let me see here. I'm just going to take, I don't want to be too self-congratulatory here. But Kate Jewett did say, love all of you, very professional, yet still human. That's what we're going for, by the way. And very curious question.
Acting.
Still human. We're acting. So anyway, we're now at the top of the hour. Good place to stop. I want to thank Dave and Bill, as well as all of you folks who came out in large numbers to attend this event. We'll be doing it again. And again, we're hoping to see you very soon at VoiceOver Revolution event, voiceoverrevolutionevent.com. And again, you can go on, put in the term webinar bonus. You're going to get a bunch of bonuses. And again, I really want to thank both of you guys for taking the time out of your day. And I know you're busy in the studio. So again, my thanks. Thank you for everyone for attending. Any final words, Mr. Fennoy, Mr. DeWees?
You know what? I want to thank everybody for joining us. There were some great questions, and I really hope you'll come to our event in Chicago. And I, more than anything, wish you great success on your voiceover career adventure. I certainly have loved my career and continue to.
We are very fortunate to do what we do for a living. There's no doubt about that. And let me just say that there's something about a live event that you can't replicate. I mean, webinars are great, and these are very helpful. It's a great tool. But there's something about going to a live event, whether it's kind of the fellowship of the people there and meeting other voice talent, but things seem to penetrate a little deeper. I think it makes a deeper mark because there's more emotion attached to it. I just really hope you can come too.
Yeah, and by the way, just so that everybody thinks, let's be really honest with the folks. This is the amount of dollars per hour that they will make doing this event when all is said and done. This is more, I mean, it's not like there's no money involved for anybody here, but they're going to be making less per hour than they are being in the studio. So let me just say that both of them.
What?
What?
Dave didn't sign up for that.
Nobody told me that. Both really like to teach. So that's the highlight, is both Dave and Bill are very good teachers. So I want to thank both of you guys for teaching tonight and for teaching in November. And thank you all for listening to their teaching.
Thanks
Folks,
for being a great moderator, Fred.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
See you guys. Bye-bye.